question, but it's kind of getting back to that when I said, well, medical decision making, there's no gold standard. That makes it really hard to, you don't even know what to aim for in some sense. Well, we do have evidence-based medicine for a few things. We know if you have a heart attack, you should definitely get an aspirin for sure. I mean, that's pretty much something we know. Technically, that's actually showing on a population level. The individual patient may not benefit from it. So that's one thing you can guide towards. And so in fact, in one of those studies, there was like the chest pain and pneumonia. Like, oh, well, if it's level A evidence, I'll say that's a better measure. And I'll say that's a little bit of a better gold standard to aim for. Except I gave up on that because there's so few things that even meet that threshold that it was almost pointless to even try to use that as a subset. And then even more so, well, you believe randomized controlled trials, evidence-based, that's like a really great gold standard to work against. Well, what % of your patients, the real-world patients you encounter, would have even met the inclusion criteria to get into the randomized controlled trial? Like a quarter of them. Which means for most patients, there's really no evidence that really tells you what to do in their particular context, which is, so it's a trade-off. Let's build the evidence as much as we can. Also, I want to build learning healthcare systems, so as we're practicing, we'll generate more data. But in the meantime, I have a huge gap. I'm trying to take care of the patients in front of me, and in the absence of that, I think having this kind of system available to me, 1,000 doctors' mind instead of just my own, I'm going to do a better job with that than without it, as at least my conjecture. Sure. I think kind of the bigger question is all decision support. We tend to like aim at the doctors, even though like there's a lot of other decision makers besides the physician. So I think certainly worthy to think about. I'm not sure of specific literature. I studied that more pointedly, but you can imagine people say, well, learn this system at like an expert institution. If you believe Stanford's an expert institution where maybe we're doing well, but there's whether it's other types of practitioners or rural community physicians, something we don't have as access to as many experts. Maybe they could actually benefit from that. Patterns learn even more so than the ones we're learning from in some sense. In fact, you also have to think about then where do you learn the patterns from? If you learn them from people who are practicing 10 years out of date, that's not good either. So yes, I think that's definitely a potential. I focus on the doctor right now just because that's the use case that I'm personally familiar with, but really there's a lot more potential to reach beyond the physician in terms of good decision making. Really, it should be the patients actually is where most of the influence can happen, but the doctor is actually an easier lever point.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I used Facebook, and one of the things, I used a key informant, and he happened to be in the Joslin Medalist group. So Joslin medals are given to individuals who have had type 1 diabetes for over 50 years. And I found out that they had a closed group that nobody else could access into, but he shared the link in that group, and that's where I tended to get a lot of my data from, which is why I think I have so many individuals with over 50 years of type 1 diabetes experience. And it was amazing to recruit off of social media because I got all of my data within 3 weeks.
Okay. Currently, what you see on this video is a control box. Okay, so on the desk on the tabletop. So the control box is quite portable. It's about 1.5 kg, right? So of course, if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see another version of it, which we call the waist belt version. So the waist belt version is much more portable. It's just a waist belt with all the pumps, all the valves, and the control system on it, right? And then you just wear the glove. Right? So it's about 800 grams. It's really portable with that waist belt version, right? But of course, the next steps that we are looking at is looking at new pump technology that is more miniaturized. Okay, we're trying to get also design house to really miniaturize the entire electronics, okay, so that it becomes slicker and also more lightweight. Okay, and of course, if you look at the control strategies that we use here is based on the contralateral hand, okay, using the flex sensors on the sensor glove to map the actions onto the robotic glove. Okay, so that's one control strategy. The other control strategy is what we have is by pressing buttons. So we have some pre-programmed buttons that select for single finger extension, okay, or for full grasping, or for 3-finger pinching, right? So we can program for that. We also have a muscle sensor version where you can attach the sensors onto your forearm muscles, and then you can use your forearm by sending an intention to your forearm. You can actually activate or amplify the signals to activate whether you want a hand opening or hand closing. Right, so these are all the different control strategies that we already have in place. Thanks.
So multiple pieces to that question. One is like, hey, some of those things that were the most interesting top of the list, but actually the possibility is only like 12%. So you definitely don't automate this thing and just say, hey, just go do whatever's at the top of the list. That's actually an extremely bad thing to do. I definitely want the doctor in the loop. This is an information retrieval problem, and it's also thinking about the physician workflow. Otherwise, I have to think of these things off the top of my head, which, as you can imagine, is error-prone and unreliable process. But if you put the 20 things in front of me, like it's like multiple choice question, basically, it's much easier for me to recall or recognize than to recall from off the top of my head. So eventually I could roll on things like natural language processing, pull keywords out of notes and see how that triggers things. I showed ICD kinds as an example because they're just like easy to understand, right? So I can show you pneumonia and let people know what that means. But the way the system works is just the fact that you ordered a CT head, well, then you can then predict what tends to happen after that, for example. And that's actually very powerful because the doctors don't act at random. The fact that I ordered a head CT on somebody, there was a purpose to that, right? There's only so many reasons I would have done that. The fact that I ordered aspirin for my patient, in the patient, there's only so many reasons you basically give somebody an aspirin. You can already sort of figure out what's going on with the patient, even not knowing anything else. So use the notes if you have them as another source of information that could be richer. That doesn't work so well for real-time decision support, right? Because I don't write my notes until the end of the day. By the time I'm writing that, I've already executed the plan for my patient. So I'm trying to think about also what would the doctor be interacting right on the spot. So a lot of interesting and complex ways that this has to be unraveled further. But at one point, I would just really start home. I'm not trying to build a medical automaton. I think it's actually very dangerous to do so. I'm trying to build an information retrieval system, essentially, augment the ability of the physician already practicing with additional information and expertise and experience that other doctors have, disseminating in a way that is executable and reproducible. Right? I mean, I could read a clinical practice guideline too, assuming one exists for your patient, which a lot of times doesn't. But then it's like I'm reading that in English prose, which I then have to translate into a form that the computer will understand to apply the point of care. But since if you use the data that's available right at the point of care, it kind of plugs in a direct way. A lot more really cool stuff we can talk about. That's the thing I wanted to call this thing was OmniConsole. Like you consult everybody rather than just consult one person. I didn't because in terms of the company named that. I tried PanConsole, there's a company named that too, so I gave up and just call it OrderX. But yes, that's where the idea was inspired from. Is in real practice, really what you can do in real life, you consult, you just ask a person, you phone a friend, but really kind of amplifying that thing to the next level in two ways. One is don't ask one person, ask 1,000 people. The other thing being even one person's not going to be available 24 hours a day. Is there some more streamlined way I can get access to that kind of expertise and information immediately on the spot right as I'm making my decisions, rather than call somebody and then they'll get back to you in 4 hours and then this kind of thing. That's a great thought. I actually haven't been thinking about it as much right now. By design, I mean the question about which disease areas. People ask which disease you want to target because basically at the end of the day I'm choosing is really what they're asking. I've kind of deliberately avoided that a little bit because I think I'm trying to build a framework that's general. Because again, a lot of decision for it's like I'll knock out one disease at a time, one CPG at a time, one alert at a time. Oh, brother, another alert the doctor has to run into. And I think part of the reason why order sets or templates are a thing that exists right now, basically doctors just don't use them. Most of them don't even know they exist if they do use them, or if they know they exist, they don't use them because when I got that altered mental status patient, I go looking for, there's no template. I'm not even going to bother looking next time. And then we get used to it in the habit. 85% of the orders at Stanford Hospital, it's the doctors making them off the top of their head. They don't use any kind of decision support or any kind of template. So I'm trying to make a framework that's general. So no matter what, it'll always give you something useful to work with. But I think it's a good question for me to think about if there's a particular area to target where there's minimal evidence but high acuity. Actually, critical care or neonatal care would actually be very high acuity, very high likelihood of death, and actually it's very extremely low evidence kind of inform those decisions. But we have to make those on the spot in a much tighter framework. So I made that up just right now, literally. Let's call it critical care would be a great target area. I was going to ask for you kind of in the robotic hand. I think kind of getting back to the point, just interesting the control system. Because if I have to use my left hand to control my right hand, well, why don't I just use my left hand
then? Okay, because some actions require bimanual manipulation, right? For instance, I need to uncap a bottle, right? I need to hold it with my left hand and then use my right hand to control it, right? So we have a system in place where you can disengage the mapping system, right? So you can first you can first grip the bottle, right? Grip the bottle and then okay, maybe not in this case, okay, but we do have an active action that is based on the muscle activity, right? So we use the sensor glove hand, okay? We use the healthy hand to hold the bottle, and then we can activate the biceps, not the biceps, but the forearm muscles, and then that will control the other hand to grip the cap. And then we can do the rotation so that you can uncap the bottle, right? So Actually, that's feasible because we do have another version that we put the sensors on the unhealthy end. And then because there's weak muscle signals, we can detect the weak muscle signals and then amplify it. And then use these amplified signals to control the robotic glove. And then we will move into the intended action. Yeah.
Think about older adults and if they use technology or not. So anybody who's using a continuous glucose monitor obviously is engaged in some form of technology. So if you're looking at a different disease state, are they going to be on Facebook? I mean, we have no idea. So I think that as kind of we talk about this baby boomer tsunami, all of the baby boomers are aging, right? So I think if you're looking at 65 and older, there's a lot of baby boomers who haven't had access to internet and other technologies for a long time, so they're using it, they're online, and so you can probably recruit very easily a certain segment of people, but is there that digital divide of people who aren't online that you'd have more difficulty recruiting?
In your survey, does that also let you access?
Ask for it. Yeah, I mean, you can consent to anything. Yeah, we could have done that. I think that, if you look at some various social media analytic softwares, Facebook's the hardest one to break into because of all the privacy. Twitter's the easiest because only 3% of people are private on Twitter. So Facebook's a little bit harder, but if they give you access somehow, almost they'd have to friend you so that you have access to get in.
I don't know if their policy changed.